Hello there and welcome back to Valdis Story. So you may notice that we have some stat and level ups that we didn't have last time. I did a bit of off-screen grinding is the thing. I needed to do that for some materials for some of the purchases we're going to be making today. That's a thing you're inevitably going to have to do when you're playing through this game, is farm for some sort of material. Usually one of the more common ones, oddly enough, like these polished stones here, simply because they're used in so many purchases that you're very likely to run out at some point. The one exception is if you end up going for a luck build, because in addition to the myriad of other things that luck does, it gives a whole wide variety of stat bonuses. It also greatly increases the item drop rate. Usually on luck-based characters that I've gone through this game with, I've never had to farm anything, and it's nice. But that's not what we're doing here with Reina, and that's fine because agility is probably the best build for Reina. Now, with that level up we got there earlier, we ended up going a little bit in intelligence. Now, a pure agility build, as I think I mentioned before, is far and away the strongest Reina build you can possibly have, but going a little bit into magic gives us a few more options. It makes things a little bit more fun overall, even if we're not as efficient of a killer. And honestly, we don't need to be super efficient with the min-maxing just because of all the ridiculously good stuff that Reina gets, such as this totem here. So I picked up the upgrade that makes the totem provide life leech, as opposed to MP leech when it's out. Always having a form of HP regeneration, even if it's pretty minor, is really helpful in this game. It can end up help offsetting DOTs and just provide a general heal so long as you can avoid taking damage for the most part. And the totem in particular is a really good weapon even if you don't get those upgrades. Rather than being a unique weapon with its own moveset, it instead has a slightly altered unarmed moveset. You lose the ability to jump to do a launcher, but instead both the light and the heavy combo have a launcher after a few hits. In my opinion, it's overall not as good of a moveset, but it's still pretty damn good, and better than any of Reina's other options, at least for an agility-focused build. So right there, I did a little bit of farming because where we're going, we really want a warmth elixir. We're going to be in a rather chilly place, and we really don't want to deal with environmental damage, even with having life leech. So back to the totem. Whenever you do a heavy attack, you will spawn a totem that will stick around for a certain amount of time. It's like around 15-20 seconds or so, or until you get far enough away from it, till it's off screen. And while active, the totem will constantly attack nearby enemies, causing a small amount of damage, nothing amazing, but also having a high chance of proccing status effects. Now, the element of the totem depends on whatever your side spell is. So we have a fire spell here, it's a fire totem. If we have a divine spell, it'll be a divine totem, and so on and so forth. We'll be having it be a divine totem for the most part, because having that totem out means we'll be able to easily inflict reckoning on pretty much every enemy. And as long as we have our God Hand Divine Damage buff active, that means we're going to be absolutely shitting out damage on absolutely everything. And you'll see just how ridiculous that gets a little bit later on. The totem is also good because if you combine it with just long attack strings, you can end up stun-locking enemies and preventing them from doing anything, as we did with that rather nasty bunny rabbit there. Of course, the totem isn't all good. Summoning the totem costs a not inconsiderable amount of NP, which is only a further burden if you're constantly reapplying your God Hand buff. Basically, it's very easy to end up running out of MP when you're using the totem weapon. So it's great during boss fights where you're going to want to be using all of your MP anyway, but not so much during the level exploration segments when you're going to keep some MP around for the boss, or just for environmental exploration with spells. So even though we'll be using the totem for the entirety of this episode, in the future we'll probably stick to regular unarmed for the levels, and then switching over to the totem for boss fights. That's generally how I prefer playing Reina when doing this sort of build. Yep, this is just yet another example of how ridiculous her damage output gets when using the totem. That is normally a rather nasty encounter since there's 3 upgraded angelic gunslingers. But with focus mode, totem, and god hand, they really can't do much at all. Now, to be fair to the enemies, part of the reason that we're carving through them so effortlessly is because this area is balanced to be a little bit easy for where we are currently in the game. You can access this area as soon as you have the skeleton key, and you really should because of this NPC right here. This here is Demon, and as his martial arts getup would suggest, he is a trainer. Not a spell trainer, but a skill trainer. And one of the skills that he offers is so good that we're going to backtrack to the library immediately to purchase it. It is really a game changer, and an interesting example of how the design of this game changed over time with each of the updates that the developers added. I'll get into that in just a second. So, he offers a lot of good stuff like increasing your base combo by 1, but the skill I was referring to is this one here. Kiss the Sky, a double jump. Yup. He also offers mana regeneration and a critical damage boost, which we will want to pick up once we actually find one of these ancient coins. So, in previous versions of the game, he did not offer a double jump. Instead, double jump was actually a spell from a soul that we have yet to acquire. So now the double jump is available a lot earlier, and you now have a different spell in place of what used to be the double jump spell. And it's arguably more useful than a double jump, at least in certain circumstances. So, as for what's going on right here, yeah, those tiny ass spikes that are barely visible, they do insane amounts of damage, to us at least. Not so much to the enemy. I mean, it's taking 3 damage per tick and it's healing 8 per tick, so it will presumably eventually die, but given how annoying that repeated noise is, I think we'll just leave them to their own devices, to suffer for however long it actually takes them to die. Death by 1,000 cuts has never been so cruel. So here we're just changing up our spell loadout a little bit. I thought that the boss was right up ahead, but there's actually another room in between it and us. I don't always remember the level design in this game perfectly. It's not bad level design by any means, it's just not super memorable a lot of the time. But we're introduced to a new enemy type. I want to say that this new angelic enemy is called like a Mad Templar or something like that. Or maybe it's a Mad Priestess. There is a lore guide I could look up to actually confirm this, but I really don't care to. They're not too threatening, they basically do 2 things. Surrounding themselves in a shield that prevents them from taking all damage until you break it, and then causing these little lightning options around them. They're really not all that threatening, you can just go up to them immediately and start wailing on them, and even if you end up taking damage, it's really not going to be much. They can be dangerous when encountered with other enemies because they're pretty good at setting up stun locks, but otherwise they're just really not a threat. Now here is the boss. I'm basically just making sure I have my composure because this boss can go south quickly if you don't handle it well. This here is Abigail. In her backstory, she was humiliated by Wyatt's father, Kadan. But this doesn't really come up when you're playing as Reina. She mostly just ends up spouting, holier than thou, oh, how could you have fallen to the wrong side? But she's also pretty cool because she's basically a techno-wizard. All of her abilities and spells and whatnot are produced by items that she uses, which is pretty rad. So Abigail here has a very simple attack pattern. She is either constantly doing a series of spells that increases in intensity and number as the fight goes on and as her HP drops. And then after exhausting all of her spells, she'll remain floating, recovering her shield, to start attacking once again. because of how quickly she ends up teleporting around when in her aggressive phase, the only time you can do damage is when she's in that brief cooldown period, which you can extend by attacking her. So this fight pretty much just comes down to being 100% defensive when Abigail is attacking, and being 100% offensive when she's defending. What makes this a potentially very difficult fight is that when she gets to very low HP, she starts spamming attacks to a ridiculous degree. Unfortunately for her, she is so easily cheesed by just standing in one corner and placing your guard up. If you're up against the wall, she has no ability to actually hit you around your shield, and she really can't do anything. You can kind of tell that this fight was designed before they ended up adding the perfect guard ability in the game, and unfortunately they didn't really alter her to account for that once they added that in. Alas, we almost ended up with a SAS rank, but unfortunately we did just a little bit too good for that. Well, it is what it is. We did get another level up, so we're even closer to level 15, where we'll be able to pick up the capstone skills in the monk tree, all of which are incredibly good. Basically, once we pick those up, we'll be even more overpowered than we already are, and that's saying something. That's why I'm feeling free to boost our intelligence, which has now gotten high enough to give us a little bit of extra spell ruin, which probably isn't going to come in too handy. It will increase the damage that our God Hand buff applies, but not by a significant amount. You really do need a lot of spell ruin to really carve through an enemy's magic defense. But every little bit helps. That's the main reason why a pure stat build in this game is always the best you can do, regardless of which stat you end up picking, as opposed to doing a more hybrid build. The compounding bonuses that you get from raising a stat high enough are just that significant. Although I will note that they do cap out at 20 per stat, so once you've reached 20 in a stat, it may be worth investing in some of the other stats. It depends. Reina is always worth going pure in agility, simply because she has so many skills in her monk tree that scale with agility even past 20. Anyway, here we are back in the sewers. We have reached the backtracking portion of this video now that we can finally collect so many things we left behind on our first run through some areas, including a new crew member. I like his attitude. So Bolverk here is a new assist, and he is quite a useful one for us. Unlike Kante, he has a brief cooldown. When you summon him, he cleaves with 2 icy axes that does a decent amount of damage and can freeze enemies, but that's not the reason why I like him. Because when you summon him, he boosts your attack for a duration, similar to how Faolan gave a bit of MP regeneration for a duration after summoning her. Now, I don't think that bonus is all that huge, but I'll take every little thing I can get, just to make Reina even stronger. So this here is back at the entrance of the sewers. With double jump in the ice tower, we can access those strange glasses. Maybe we'll see what those do later on. And through this brick wall here, we encounter a boss. Another angelic one, guarding an angelic key. Finally we'll be able to open those angelic doors we've come across. So Lazo here is... well, he just kind of is. I don't have too much more to say about him, I'm afraid. Okay, now, to be fair to Lazo here, he is a proper boss with a rather unique gimmick that can be potentially quite a bit of trouble for certain builds. Just not for us. So he is one of those bosses that has a regenerating shield. You need to take it down to do damage to his health. The thing is, normally he'll end up recovering his shield after a time, either after he manages to successfully attack you, or after you've attacked him enough and he'll automatically respond with an auto parry that teleports him away and instantly recovers his shield. The thing is that between Reina's flurry of blows and the constant laser spam from the totem, he never got a chance to do anything, we just completely shut him down with a perfect stun lock, and thus avoided his gimmick entirely. So, now we're back in the previous frozen area that we explored, the Frozen Crypts, where we fought Rukjal as our boss. This was the timed platforming run we did, and we're going through it once again because there's something else we can do here. Those torches that were in the background weren't just there as environmental decoration. They can be interacted with, set on fire. What happens if you set all 3 on fire, you ask? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned to find out. Fortunately, the time limit for doing this isn't nearly as strict when your goal is to light these torches. Oh, did you hear that? It sounded like the cry of a feral appearing after we lit all 3 torches. And it's not just any feral, but a mini-boss. A fire elemental version of this enemy type that we've come across before. And perhaps one of the most dangerous enemies in the game. We don't have protection from fire this time, and this ends up being a literal bullet hell boss fight. I'm honestly not even sure how you're supposed to avoid most of this shit and get in damage without taking damage yourself. There's just so much going on here that even the game itself can't quite handle it, and we're experiencing some pretty bad frame drops. Not entirely a bad thing, I'll note, as it also induces a bit of NES-style slowdown, which really helps with avoiding these Danmaku. But our reward for taking this down is one of a few Archferal spirits. There are only 3 in the game, and they're all used for the purchase of a very specific singular item. And a very good item at that, so it's definitely worth taking that down. We'll find out the location of the other 2 later. For now, back to backtracking through this place, picking up the items we missed. It's all pretty good stuff. The Grander Gate, for example, is an important item in upgrading spells. I think I mentioned that before. We're at the point of the game where anything we get from a chest is going to be pretty worthwhile, and not just common tier trash. Just doing a little bit of a fade there because of a break I took in the middle of recording. I swear I wasn't save scumming. Up here, this first, I think, skull door that we came across, it's our final life potion. You get 3 total, and that's honestly more than enough for any area. There's also some frame drops here, oddly enough, that actually happened multiple times in this recording, and I'm really not sure why, since I went through these areas just fine before. Maybe my computer was just a little bit tired. So, that right there is one of 3 guaranteed ancient coins that the game gives you. They're all available from treasure chests scattered throughout the world. And unless you're playing as a luck-focused build, or you're willing to respec and put a bunch of points into luck, you have to spend those ancient coins wisely. Because the only way to get more than 3 is to increase your luck past 5, at which point they'll start dropping very rarely from enemies. If you actually end up getting your luck up high enough, like plus 15, you'll end up getting ancient coin drops pretty often, and so you can basically pick up anything that costs ancient coins. But as an agility and in-focus build, we will have to spend those wisely. I should also point out that in order to get ancient coins to drop, you seem to need to raise your base luck stat. Getting luck bonuses from armor or even from boss fights doesn't seem to count towards that. At least that's what seems to be the common consensus among players of this game. There's not exactly hard data on that though. This game does that Dark Souls style thing of having a lot of really obscure mechanical interactions that, because of its lack of popularity, unlike Dark Souls, are mostly undiscovered. Or at least there ends up being a lot of hearsay as to what affects what. Though the community for this game, such as it is, isn't completely bereft of good data, there are actually a few pretty comprehensive videos that cover some of the more important aspects of combat. For example, the fact that elemental buffs end up adding a fixed amount of damage per hit, and so are much better with fast-hitting weapons, as opposed to slow-hitting ones. So I do just want to take the time to reiterate here, I think I mentioned this before, you really don't need to take all of this finite mechanical details into consideration when playing. I'm only bringing it up because I find it interesting. And with this playthrough I am striving to be fairly comprehensive with the information I provide. On that note, this was actually something I wanted to bring up earlier, but I kind of forgot until now. Someone actually corrected me in the thread as to how the combat braces work. I claimed that they only added damage to unarmed attacks, and that's not quite right. That's how the fighter bandages accessory I noted works. But the combat braces end up adding damage to any weapon that you have equipped. So if you can suffer the loss of -1 base combo, it's worth having equipped. Oh hey, we got another crew member. Shadow Boxer, with X's, cause he's extreme, like a ninja. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure who takes the crown of most annoying OC in this game. Shadow Boxer in his annoyingly spelled name, or V's in just the entire circumstances surrounding that character. It's definitely a toss-up. I should note that my jibes here are all in good fun, just on the off chance that either of those two people who made those characters ends up watching this. No insult intended. I just am highly questioning some of your life choices here. Anyway, Shadow Boxer is another assist character that we'll probably check out later, if I ever end up feeling like getting around to it. Him and V's both. It's gonna be hard though to separate myself from my bros Bulwark and Kante. They are just so useful, and while I've used Bulwark on other playthroughs, I never actually made too much use of Kante, thanks to his long cooldown. But goddamn if he isn't the most useful assist when fighting groups of enemies. Anyway, we're basically done here. We've picked up everything in those areas that we've backtracked through. That's why I've waited so long to do that. I could have picked up some of the items beforehand, but I prefer to wait until I can pick up all of them in one fell swoop. Waste less time that way. So yeah, that's it for this episode. Next time we'll be exploring more and perhaps finding a demonic key to go along with our angelic one.